Underwhelming is the word, isn't it? Mohamed, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Absolutely. Underwhelming is the word. And even more than that, no win, 7 goals conceded over 4 games. This is very unusual for Egypt. Let me remind you that the last time Egypt played the final at the AFCON, which was the previous edition, they only conceded 2 over 7 games. So to concede 7 in 4 games, that was outrageous. The very fact that Egypt gets out of the AFCON, out of the competition without a single win is something that hasn't happened since 1992. So I was 4 years old back then. So that's the first time for me as well to see Egypt come out of the AFCON without a single win. That's really outrageous, really disappointing, given the fact that with Salah, with a positive run prior to the tournament, so many of us thought that Egypt can go all the way and win an 8th title, but it wasn't meant to happen this time around.
Why have they been so poor then? I mean, I presume you would like to hear the manager's explanation for it, but manager and players didn't speak after going out last night, so it'd be difficult to get their thoughts. Why do you think they've gone out?
That's a classic Egyptian reaction as well. I don't know why Egypt managers and players never speak to the media after they lose. 100 and something million Egyptians deserve an explanation, at least, especially when you come as favourites, when you come as the most decorated nation in the history of the tournament. But from what I've seen from Egypt, this is the poorest defensive Egypt side I've ever seen. I mean, since I started watching the Cup of Nations, the way Rui Vitória tried to shape this team was to create a team that goes forward, that attacks, and this kind of defies what this team stood for in the previous 2 to 3 editions of AFCON, a team that's compact, that's solid at the back, and hits on the counter, relying on Mohamed Salah, who wasn't at his best at this AFCON, who missed the final group stage game and the round of 16 game. And that's another thing to discuss. But I think Rui Vitória's tactics and squad selection as well, because what he promised Egypt when they signed him for 4 years, and this was quite unusual to sign an international manager for 4 years, is to create a different team for Egypt, a new team that can go to the 2026 World Cup. This didn't happen. We had the oldest squad in the Africa Cup of Nations. Our youngest player was 24 to 25 years old, and many of the veterans were still around. We relied on the likes of Ahmed Higazi and Nenni, who came back from long injuries, and one of them actually didn't even play a domestic league game with his team before coming to the Cup of Nations. So it showed on the pitch. Egypt looked slow, unresponsive, and at some point, I don't know if you guys saw the goal Egypt conceded last night against the DRC. So there was a throw-in. The Egyptians called it for themselves, and they just stopped while the Congolese players played the throw-in, crossed the ball over, and put the ball in the back of the net. Meanwhile, Egyptians were looking for VAR. And it just shows you that this team lacked leadership. This team lacked someone to be in charge. And this is very unusual for Egypt. The main point of strength of all Egyptian teams we've seen is the very ability to create a solid group, to go ahead and show character, which wasn't shown over 4 games in this Cup of Nations.
Do you think that obviously the injury to Salah looks like the point at which everything changes? But you mentioned that Egypt have a tendency to be over-reliant on him. Is that inevitable when you have kind of your best player is one of the best in the world, and the next group of players is not even at the next level down? There's too much of a gap almost. Is there a point where having a star that big is actually a little bit of a problem for a country like Egypt?
I wouldn't think it should be a problem. If you have one of the best players in the world, you kind of need to make use of them, right? And a player like Salah has a massive record with Egypt. He scored a lot of goals, led the Egypt team single-handedly to the 2018 World Cup and to the final of the previous edition. But I think there is a big gap between Salah and the players playing next to him. When we say Salah plays as a number 10, who's going to link up with Salah from the midfield, for example? When we say, let's play Salah wide and let him double team with the right back, he doesn't have Alexander-Arnold at Egypt, sadly. But again, when it comes to Salah, there were managers who did manage to capitalize on the very fact that Egypt had Salah. And Rui Vitória didn't seem like one who was capable of applying a specific kind of tactic. You know what we need? What I feel we need in Egypt is a Scaloni, is someone who creates a brand new team centralized around the talisman, and gives him and only him the freedom needed to go forward and lead that team. This is not available in this Egypt generation, sadly. And to be honest with you, I feel like Salah himself was let down by his own performance in the very first game against Mozambique and the first half against Ghana. So, it was a tournament to forget, not just for Egypt, but for Salah as well.
Mohamed, thank you very much for joining us on the Monday Night Club. Egyptian football expert Mohamed Qoutb, and Blackburn have equalised. Tom Gale.
Yes, we're all level, Mark. We're just over half an hour played. Blackburn